All right, so what's an inverse function? So an inverse function is a pretty simple idea. So functions are inverses of each other. Inverse functions have the exact opposite points on a graph. Okay, so I have an inverse function graphed right here. The inverse function is 6x minus 3. All right, and if we look at a couple of points on here, I'll move this up here more to the middle. All right, and so let's look at this this function. All right, I notice that it has a point right here, and so that is, the point is 1, 2, 3. So that point is 3, 0. Let's see, where's another point? Here's another point right here. That's easy to find. Now that point is 4, 6. 4, 6. All right. So if we had an inverse of this function, it would have a point that was the opposite. Okay, so the inverse of this point is 0, 3, and the inverse of this point is 6, 4. Okay, so pretty simple idea. Inverse just means the x's and y's are switched. All right, so let's find this point, 0, 3. So 0, 3 is right there. All right, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 4. 6, 4 is right there. All right, so I have those 2 points. So now I can draw a line, right? Okay. All right, so the inverse function of this is a line that looks like this. All right. And you could actually figure out what that line was by using your awesome algebra skills. All right, so this has a, this is 6, and this is 1. Okay, so that means the slope is 1 over 6. So this is y is 1 over 6x, and it's plus 3. Okay, all right, so that's the inverse of that line. So is there a way that we can figure that out without drawing a graph, etc.? Yeah, there is. Okay, but now we know what an inverse is. It's just the flip of the equation the other way. All right, so now let's look at that. So that equation was 6. So that equation was 6 equals minus 3. Okay, so now we want to find the inverse. All right, so here's the new function notation. All right, so this is inverse notation. All right, so the inverse of that function is going to be, sorry, I meant to put a minus sign there. The inverse of that function is going to look like this. All right, and it's a -1. And that's because anytime we have a negative exponent, like x to the -1 is equal to 1 over x. So that's an inverse. All right, so I'll just put a box around that, why it's called that. All right, so to find an inverse function, we just have a couple of steps. All right, so step 1 is to remember that when we say f of x, that's the same as saying y equals, okay? So f of x equals y equals means the same thing. All right, now step 2, we said that an inverse, we want x and y to switch. Okay, so we're going to switch x and y. All right, so where the x is, we're going to put y, and where the y is, we're going to put x. All right, so we're going to move this y over here, and we're going to move the x over there. All right, and so I'm going to say x, and black for the rest of it, equals 6 minus 3, and we move the y over there. Okay, so now we would get the opposite, okay, by opposite answers, okay? The next thing, though, is that we have to finally, where were we? Step 3. Step 3, we want to put it back into y equals something format. All right. So this is where you use your awesome algebra skills about literal translations. All right, so here is this y. We want it to be by itself. So what do we have to do to put this y by itself? Well, the first thing we have to do is divide both sides by 6. All right, so if I divide both sides by 6, divide by 6. All right, now this is x over 6. And this changed into a 1. And so now it says y subtract 3. Now I just add 3 to each side. That makes this a 0. And add 3 to this side. And I'm just about done. All right, so now this says x over 6 plus 3 equals y. And then now I use this function notation, right? So now I use now I'm going to express this in function notation for good math grammar. All right, and so instead of y, I'm going to call that the inverse of x equals x to the 6th, x over 6 plus 3. All right, so let's see if we go back on this page right here, and let's see if that's what we get. All right, so let's put this in, x divided by 6 plus 3. All right, and somewhere on here is that, there they are. Okay, so we can see that, that all that work I did before turns out to be the, all right, well, apparently it's not going to let me do that. I don't know why. All right, but before we saw that 3, 0 is a point, and so we should have 0, 3 be a point, and there it is, 0, 3. Okay, so that's your inverse function. All right, so we're going to move on to, all right, so that was our delta math problem, and you can see I already did that with the morning group, so that one is already answered. So we're going to answer a couple other ones on here, and then I'm going to let you work on it, and then you can ask me if you have any questions about how to do this. All right, so I'm going to go back here, and I'm going to go to number 3. Okay, and so this one says f of x equals 8 times x plus 10. All right, now if I was looking at my notes, I would be able to say, okay, so step 1 was write it as y equals. All right, so I did that. Okay, step 2 was switch. All right, so step 2, I'm going to switch the x and the y. And so I'm going to say x, of course you know I have to do this in color, x equals 8 times y plus 10. All right, and then step 3 was isolate or solve for y. All right, so I'm going to call it solve for y this time. Well, it's not really a solution. Okay. All right, so the first thing we're going to do is divide by 8. So we divide both these by 8, and now it says x over 8 equals y plus 10, because 8 over 8 is 1, so that went away. And now I just subtract 10 from both sides, so that becomes a 0. And I subtract 10 over here, so I get x over 8 minus 10 equals y. All right, and then I write it in, so step 4 is function notation. Function notation. So instead of y, I'm going to write f minus 1 of x equals x over 8 minus 10. then I'm going to look for that as an answer. Okay, and it actually, there it is. The very first one says x over 8 minus 10. So we hit yes and get a green check. All right. So let's look at, I forget these, which order these are in. All right, let's do this one. And f of x equals x minus 7 over 7. Change that to y equals x minus 7 over 7. Switch the two, x equals y minus 7 over 7. A lot of sevens. Okay, solve for y. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 7. All right, so multiply by 7. Those cancel out. So now I have 7x equals y minus 7. Then I add 7 to both sides. So I get 7x plus 7 equals y plus 7 over here. And then I write it in function notation equals 7x plus 7. And again, it's the first one. Seeing a pattern here maybe. And so notice so far these have been linear equations. So we don't have any exponents or radicals. Okay, but I want to get one that has, all right, so this one has a radical. And so when we have a radical or an exponent, we solve those in the case of a radical by squaring our answer, and in the case of an exponent by taking the square root. All right. So this one says f of x equals the square root of x over 2. So first I'm going to write it in the y format. That was step 1. Step 2, I'm going to switch them. X equals y over 2. All right. And then step 3, I'm going to isolate. All right. So the first thing I'm going to do is multiply both sides by 2. All right. And so those cancel out. And so now this says 2x equals the square root of y. All right. So we can't have the we can't have that radical as our answer. So how do we get rid of the square root of y? Well, we do that by squaring that. Okay, that'll change that into a y. So if we square that side, we also have to square this side. All right, and so when we square both of those sides, so we're going to get, don't forget it's 2 squared and x squared, right? So you have to square both of them. So this is 2 squared times x squared, which is 4x squared. And then this is going to equal y. So this is equal to y. Although I notice over here in their answer that they just, they didn't make you actually do this out. Okay, they actually use this as an answer. See that over there? Okay. All right, so they said the inverse is 2x squared. Oops, 2x squared. There we go. 2x squared, and that's what we want. And you have to do the reverse on, I don't want that one. I thought there was one in here that, oh, that's not it. Last one, nope, that's not in here. Okay, so if you had a function where it was x squared, so I'm just going to go that really quickly. All right, so if you had f of x equals x squared, we'll say x squared minus 2, then this is how you do that, x squared minus 2, then I flip them, so I have x equals y squared minus 2, add 2 to both sides, So we get x plus 2 equals y squared. All right, so now we have this answer. We do the, instead of squaring them, we take the square root of both sides. All right, and so because the square root of y squared is y, that equals y. And so the answer to that one is the square root of x plus 2 equals y. And so you would write it like this. Okay. All right, so that's a few of the problems that we did and how to do them. So let's take a break here.